Well, it was, I was 14 years old when we moved to Seattle. And after I'd spent this summer over across, I got a job working in the city. And we rented a little place out in what we called at that time Happy Hollow. Now they call it Nigger Hollow, because the Negroes came in there and practically took it over. Well, it was right on Madison Street and what they call Washington Park. And I would go to town every day. I worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and got $5 a week. But that's the first money outside of the strawberry ranch, which I gave Dad all that money so we could get Mother over from Ellensburg so we could set up housekeeping. And well, as far as the history of the family and the folks, there wasn't much happened then. I got married, of course, when I was 19 years old, and we moved out to University District, and Grandma came out to live with us. Well, she took care of Sally while Ma and I both worked. But at nights, or sometimes when we had a little time, got on the subject, I would get her to talking about her young life, and that's how I found out about her trip across the plains and all that sort of thing. And one day she said, Chet, couldn't you take me over to the old homestead sometime? I'd like to see it. She must have been around 70 or 75. And I says, well, we sure will. So the very next time we could go, next few days, we took Grandma, Ma, and I, and Sally, and went down to Olympia. Really, it's Tumwater is just in the edge of Olympia, and it's about 8 miles from Tumwater. We drove out what is known as the 101 highway to a certain place, and then we, instead of making a turn, we went straight ahead out into Bush Prairie. And Mother hadn't been there for, years and years, and it had all changed. And finally, she said, well, now take it easy, and so we drove along slow, and she says, stop here, and she says, now, I'm sure that's the road that goes into the homestead. Well, we had to stop and open the gate. Apparently the people that own it were using it for pasture land. So we opened the gate and drove in, and we could only go a little ways because the road hadn't been kept up and there was fallen trees on it and brush and everything. So we parked the car and walked in. There was the 4 of us. And before we walked in at a certain place, she said, stop here. So we did. And she said, right over there is where my twins were born. Father and I, Oscar and I, were out here. We lived in a little lean-to there, and I was going to have a baby, and pains came on, and Father was afraid to leave. I was afraid to let him go, so we just had to fight it through ourselves. So when it was all over, we had twins, and they were both born dead. Right over there was a little maple tree that stood 10 feet high or something. And she says, look at it now. And I stepped across. It was 60 feet from one side to the other. And my twin brothers, they were brothers, lay under that tree. So anyway, we walked down and finally came to the house, and it was just an ordinary old log cabin. But Father had built a picket fence around it, where he had his garden and all that sort of thing. And just before we got to the house, there was this big meadow, about 40 acres, that Father had cleared just with a saw and an axe and a team of mules. He had mules that time. And planted it into sometime oats, but mostly wild hay. So Mother was just, she was just in heaven. She told all about that, how Father would work. He'd daylight to dark, made no difference. And built that place, built the house himself, and the house, right alongside the house, was what they called a lean-to, and she said, "Now, Chester, here's where you were born." And it was kind of fallen down, but it was a little, built just an addition onto the shack. It was about, I'd say 5 feet wide, 10 feet long, something. That's where I was born. And she had the nerve to say that I was a beautiful baby. Can you imagine that? Of course, I've had lots of people say the same thing later. So Mother and I went down to the barn, and I said, "Mother, would you come down here?" I said, "Do you mean to tell me that my father built that barn all by himself?" And she said, "Yes, he did." Now, Father was a pretty good-sized man. He weighed about 175, 80 pounds, and just under 6 feet tall. But he had timbers up there 10, 12 feet in the air, cross pieces, that he had to pull up with a block and tackle and his team. He'd put a big pole out, anchor it down, and hook this thing on, and hook his team on. Mother go out and lead the horses, or the mules, and pull this timber up, and Dad would get up there and set it where he wanted it. And he built this barn all by himself. And if you ask a person to do it now, they'd laugh at you. And don't forget that clearing this land, every stump had to be dug out with a shovel. He was pretty good with a shovel, too. And you'd dig around the roots, and then you'd get a pry, chop them off and get a pry and pry them out. And sometimes you'd let them lay there a while until they get dry, and then you build a fire on them. Dad, I have fires all over the place, you know, for burning these stumps out. But he'd get it done. I'm telling you, it's just remarkable what that man did. If I saw the work that he did in his life stacked up in front of me, I would quit right now. I'll tell you. Huh?